I got a mother done gone on. I got a mother done gone on. Makes me feel like my time ain't long. I got a mother done gone on. Got a mother done gone on. It makes me feel like my time ain't long. Well, the bell keep a tolling, tolling. The bell keep a tolling, tolling. Make me feel like my time ain't long. Yeah, no, the bell keep a tolling, child, the bell keep a tolling. It makes me feel like my time ain't long. Well, I got a father gone on. I got a father gone on. Makes me feel like my time ain't long. Father and gone on. Father and gone on. Make me feel like my time had long. Ooh, the hearse keeper rolling, rolling. The hearse keeper rolling, rolling, and that make me feel like my time ain't long. Lordy, Lord, well, the hearse keeper rolling, rolling. The hearse keeper rolling, keep me feel like my time ain't no long.
Welcome to Plain Talk About Life in the Bible. We're actually on show 20, it turns out, of Pilgrims Progress. I hope you've enjoyed it. I wanted to say a special hello to a friend of mine, Pauline Haas. Pauline, I appreciate it when you call me, and you're very thoughtful and kind, and it means a lot to me. And I know you've had your own trials and troubles, and I think about that in these past months. But I appreciate all the more the fact that you allow God to comfort you and that you deal with these things in a Christian manner. I really do appreciate that. In case you haven't noticed, I've been gone a couple of weeks. John's faithful. I've just been gone. So you may have noticed that we ran a couple of shows that were shows that maybe from 6 months or a year ago or something. Sometimes it's very difficult to get everything done in the period you'd like to get it done. I appreciate it if you notice that we have to do that once in a while. Listen, tonight I'm glad to get back to Pilgrims Progress because it's near and dear to my heart. This whole idea of a pilgrimage that I'm on, an adventure that I'm a part of, moves me to get up in the morning, frankly, moves me to run the race knowing that every race has an ending. My life, I'm now 59. Since the last time I saw you, I've aged 1 year. And I'm just more and more aware that the grave could come tonight, tomorrow, next weekend, or at least not in the very distant future. And that's okay with me. It's just revitalized me and made me think more about running this race harder. I want to read you a second where we begin with Pilgrim's Progress here. Our hero, Christian, is at a point in his journey where he's left the valley of humiliation and he's immediately gone into the valley of the shadow of death. And as I said previously, that's really how life works. We move from the valley of the shadow of humiliation, to the valley of the shadow of death. Life is full of trials and troubles, just like I alluded to with Pauline. Pauline's a couple of years older than I am, and she's had her own trials. So do you have them. I'm never more amazed than when I deal with people, strangers, who tell me of their lives, and they're really optimistic when their whole tale of their life is one of sadness and loss and struggle and injustice and slander. And I just don't know what's in a human being that we have this spirit of hopefulness about something that, objectively speaking, is surely, as I'm fond of saying, a gauntlet, a troubled thing to run the race here on earth. There's briars and there's thorns and there's very few roses. There are a few, but it's mostly briars and thorns. As O. Henry once said, life is made up of, I think he said, sobs and sniffles and smiles. Sniffles predominating. Sobs, sniffles, and smiles, sniffles predominating. That's kind of how life really is. And I never forgotten, when I look back at my own life, just how many struggles and troubles I've had. And I'm always hopeful they're done, but they're never done. If there's a book of troubles, I may be on chapter 8 of a 16-chapter book. I'm sure your life is the same way, and the answer to that really is to go to the truth, which is all of us are pilgrims. We're all leaving this world, and live accordingly. And I want you to know that the part about the valley of the shadow of death is, of course, from a very famous Bible verse, chapter 23 of the Psalms, verse 4. Yea, though I walk through this valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Is that really how it is that we walk through the valley of the shadow of death? The psalmist was feeling that psalmist being David. Whether he understood that of his whole life or understood it of a particular event or period in his life is inconsequential. He says, I will fear no evil. Now, you can read a lot of Psalms by David where he does have fears. There's no doubt about it. His wasn't a faith of bravado. His was a thoughtful faith, one that begins with fears and doubts and is overcome by reasonings and the truth, and we call that faith. It is the overcoming of doubts and fears. It's not the absence of them. And you need to get that in, because we all, great men. This last week I've been reading the story of a couple of great men, and each of them said basically the same thing, which is situations arose in my life and I reacted almost as if I weren't a Christian. But after consideration of the Lord being with me, after consideration of great men who struggled just like I was, I came to a peace about it. Well, when men tell you that, they've done just what I just said to you. They've had doubts and fears. They've had panic attacks over situations that have arisen in their lives. But after thoughtful consideration and prayer and Bible study, communing with their God, they come to a peace about it, and they triumph. And that's faith. That's real faith, not some mind game that people play. And I say all that because in our book, Pilgrim's Progress, the hero now is moving into this valley of the shadow of death, and I know the good part of it is he's going to come out the other side, and he's going to look back and see that all those troubles had a place in his life, and in fact, he was trained by those troubles. And that's what I want to say to you. I can look back at my own life from here and see that most of the good things that have ever happened to me were bad things to begin with. Good things being things that changed my mind, things that took my heart off of this world and set them on heaven. The only way that usually happens in my case is to have a real crisis. Perhaps that's the way with you. That's the way God molds us many times. Remember, the Bible describes God as a great potter with the clay in front of him, molding it and taking it. Have you ever watched a potter like that? He'll spin that wheel, he'll pump that wheel, and he'll take a big knife sometimes and hold it against that clay as it goes around. Other times he takes a real fine tool or the edge of a finger and molds that thing into a beautiful piece of work. And that's exactly what the Bible says our lives are like. It's Jeremiah 18, Isaiah 45, Romans 9. It all uses that same image of the potter and the clay. You being the clay, your Creator being the potter. And mostly that broad knife that he holds against it in my life and probably yours is trouble, trial, sickness, loss, all kinds of things that befall us in this world don't happen accidentally. God permits them to shape us and to take our hearts off of this perishing world and to put them on that everlasting world. So we're going to break here a second. When I come back, I want to talk to you about eternity a minute and some images that I've been thinking about. Thanks.
As I traveled on my journey, few and far
You know,
between,
there was a great man, a great English preacher. His name was Thomas Brooks. And I want to read you, he was sort of famous for his quotes, and I'd like to read you one that's been thought-provoking to me. Do you live as if there is no death? Do you live as if heaven doesn't exist? Or as if earth is more preferable? Think about that. Do we live as if there is no death? Or as if somehow earth is preferable to heaven? It's something that when I ask people that, most people say, oh no, I know death exists, but most people in a practical sense live without the thought of it all the time, even though we're surrounded with it. The falling leaves, the winter season, the obituaries, but we still prefer not to have it on our minds. I was driving with my son to Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to explain to him that I'd like to come up with some ideas about how to explain eternity to people that are better than what I have. And we were talking about different things that we heard people say. And I was trying to explain to him that most of the time I use this explanation of eternity. I say, if you started in New York City, and you and I, let's say it's Pauline. I've been thinking about Pauline all day. Let's say Pauline and I are holding hands, and we have a long, one of those sort of wheels with chalk on it. And we started walking from New York City, and we walked all the way to Los Angeles, say approximately 3,000 miles. And we marked a line. And Pauline fixed me dinner, and we turned around, and we walked back with our chalk, I don't know what that thing is called, but a little chalk line, all the way back to New York City. Now we've covered 6,000 miles. Let's suppose that Pauline gets a second wind, and we walk all the way from New York back to L.A. Now we've gone 9,000 miles. At that point, I'm kind of anxious to get back where we began, and we go again. Now let's suppose that for various reasons, we keep walking. And maybe we walk 50 times. Pauline and I. Same line every time, carefully, meticulously, to L.A., back to New York. At the end of 50 trips, Pauline takes out one of those needles she has, probably in her purse, a long sewing needle, long, thin sewing needle, and she jabs it into the ground in the middle of our chalk line. Now, if you're guessing that I'm going to say to you that needle, that thin sewing needle represents your life compared to eternity, you're wrong. That thin sewing needle would be an overstatement of how long time exists compared to eternity.